So my name is Luke Mealy. I'm the organizer of Ember.js NYC. Thank you all for coming out tonight. Hope you all had a great summer and are ready to get down and write some awesome code this fall. We've got an awesome lineup tonight. We've got a talk from Matthew Beale on complex architectures in Ember. We've got a talk from Chris Selden about the Ember Roadmap post 1.0. We've got 4 awesome lightning talks / demos that we're going to put in the middle of the program. So that's totally awesome. Before we get to the program, though, I wanted to say thank you to Booker, who's our host tonight. This is our first time in this space. It's a beautiful space, great view, great food. So totally awesome. And to tell you a little bit about Booker and what goes on here, I want to introduce Booker's CTO, who is Russ Cherry.
Thank you. It's great to see so many people out tonight. So thanks all for coming out. Just a quick little bit on Booker. We're here on this floor, in the 18th floor. We're a young company that is out there providing new ways for small businesses to manage their business and provide services to their clients. We have a very cool platform, allows clients to book appointments for services. And on the backside, it allows the business owners to manage all their assets, manage their employees, their schedules, their rooms, their assets that they're using to provide those services. It allows them to market to those customers. It allows them to actually settle at the end of the service being provided so they can collect money. For some reason, that's important to them. It's a cool platform. We're a young company. We're growing. You might hear I mention like 3 or 4 times tonight. We're growing. We're hiring. It's a fun place to be. There's a lot of folks here. Some of them Booker branded. Some of us not quite so Booker branded. That are bringing on folks. I'm bringing on folks in the tech organization. I need project managers. I need developers. We're bringing people in our product management organization. Mike Summers over here is bringing in product managers and product designers. So if you have any interest in a cool gig at a cool place with a neat platform and a lot of upside to the company, find one of these Booker branded folks or myself or Mike, and we'd be happy to talk with you. Enough of the plug. We'll get on. I think Matthew's first. Is that right? Are you?
I got a couple of announcements. Right. Thank you so much, Russ. Appreciate it. One more question for you, Russ. You guys use Ember?
Yes, we do.
All right. Awesome.
Yes, we do. And one of those cool demos is ours.
Yeah, Casey Spain is going to show you. You probably know from the meetups that we've been running over the past year and a half. He's going to show you some of that code here. So a couple of items of business to get through before we bring Matthew up. As you know, we've been running a sister kind of type of meetup to this one that we've been calling Hacker Hours. And we've been exploring with how to evolve that program. And so to tell you a little bit about what we've got planned for that, I want to invite Excel up to the front. And he's going to share when the next one is, as well as what we're going to do with the format. Thanks.
Thanks, Luke. So I'm Xavier. I help organize that hour. Kevin actually is joining me to help with that effort. We have a good attendance. We're trying to manage to get 30 people in. It's a great way to actually find help when you find like you have an issue developing with Ember. Actually, we have some of these guys showing up. I mean, it's really a great opportunity to get access to core developers or people who are very seasoned with the technology. So I want to invite everybody to join. And we were trying to figure out what was how to really like provide some value to people who are coming, and trying to structure what we were doing during the Hacker Hours. So the next one, which is going to be on October 1st, it's a Tuesday, I think. We are going to have some presentation and maybe some live coding, really something we are going to put out there like a week before the Hacker Hours, so that people can actually download and try to practice their skills, trying to experience Ember.js by themselves, and then during the hour would be actually during the session will be just trying to solve the problem that everybody has have had. That will be as a main theme, as kind of a red line, so that people can actually explore Ember.js. And on the other side, I mean, people who have actually problem with their own projects can show up and have access to people who are resourceful and helping them debugging or whatever question that might come, they'll be able to help them with that. So once again, I mean, I really want to invite people to come to this session, because I mean, once again, you have access to people who are very knowledgeable, and I mean, it's you get help right away, so that's great. Thanks a lot.
So that's October 1st, and RSVP information for that will be up on the meetup site within the next day or two. The next formal meetup like this one with talks is going to be awesome. Is going to be on October 24th. I'm looking for speaker and topics for that meetup, so talk to me if you're interested. A couple of other more community-wide announcements. The big news for anybody who was under a rock is that Ember 1.0 shipped. Applause. So it's been a long time coming, and those of you who've been using Ember for a while dealt with a lot of API changes, and so we're really excited now to have a stable 1.0 to build on, and we're going to hear a little bit more about what that future is from Chris Selden later tonight. Along with, shortly on the heels of 1.0, there was a new member of the Ember core team announced, and he's a fixture of the New York community, so I just wanted to congratulate him in public. It's Alex Matchneer. Alex did awesome work on the Ember router, as well as lots of other parts of Ember as well, but is well deserved, and we appreciate all of your volunteer work in support of us. With that, I'm excited to announce our first speaker. I've known Matthew for, I don't know, 4 or 5 years at least. First in the Ruby community, and then as this new crazy Ember thing came around, Matthew was one of the first people who showed up and started hacking on it, and he has become quite an expert building a successful consultancy, helping a number of different New York startups execute on their Ember plans, and most recently speaking at the first ever European Ember conference, Emberfest. And it's the talk that he's sharing tonight is the one that he prepared for that conference. So we're really excited to hear it. And with that, turn it over to Matthew.
Okay, I'm gonna try and hold on to this so I can step around and do big motions. So I'm Matthew. Luke already gave me an awesome intro, so we don't need to look at any more stuff about me. So we're going to make some Ember.js apps, and they're going to be really cool, right? They're going to be all one page, and we're going to have all these new problems that we're going to solve by using Ember, like routing and maintaining state over a long time and all these other things. These apps, then we're going to be we can do something really cool with them, and I can do all these extra things I wasn't able to do when I had a multi-page app, because now everything's on one page, and I have all these great features, and then suddenly one day we're like, oh dear Lord, what have I created? And so we can go back to something simple. Let's see how we get there, and then maybe a strategy or two for how we can help to deal with that complexity. So to start with something simple, I'm going to start with something I might get from a designer. So a designer gives you a little mock-up that says, this is what I want my page to look like. I have this title body, I have a preview. When they click on preview, it goes into the preview on the side. When they click on submit, it saves. You're like, oh, this is Ember can live preview. And they're like, I don't want that. And I'm in charge. So they click on preview, and I want the preview to show up. And you're like, okay, I can do this. So when I look at something like this, I see a breakdown of DOM as the first thing. So I say, okay, I'm going to have a div on top, I'm going to have a div on bottom, and they're going to be wrappers, and I'm going to have 2 divs floated on the inside. So there'll be a float left and another float left, and it'll be cleared, and the same thing on the bottom. Pretty normal HTML dummy stuff. Really cool. So I put together some HTML, and I'm going to do it in Ember in a template here. So I have an input and a value inside of a float, and then a preview inside of a float, and then I have 2 buttons, and they're going to have an action of preview and an action of submit. Pretty simple still, right? we're feeling good here. We're like, yeah, Ember, making it happen. We have HTML. Everything's really nice, and it's showed us how I lay out the page, which is what HTML is really for. It's really a template, so I guess there's a few things in there that aren't just HTML, and maybe those things had a side effect that I wasn't really thinking about, because I was just thinking about the HTML. So when I made this, I had an action for preview. That action needs to tell this nice little component, post preview, what to do. It needs to tell it to start this preview, to trigger this thing. The issue is that there's no way to do that, right? Like, I have no obvious way to handle those things to tell them to talk to each other. So I call this like this chasm of DOM. And I think this is a really simple example. Another more complex example might be something like a modal, where you have part of your DOM that needs to be edited or injected or updated that's based upon an action in something that's very distant. Ember apps, I believe, are closely tied to the DOM, and so you kind of need to use this DOM to direct your architecture and think about it while you work there. So there's a couple different solutions that we have. I could use a view name. So view names is kind of not so well-known little trick here. You specify a view name for any view, and components are really just views, and you tell it its name of preview, and then I'm going to have a target. It's going to look at the current view and then call .preview on it. So view name registers that view's instance on the parent view. So that's one workaround. Workaround 2 would be to actually use a view instead of a component and do something similar. And now I don't have a component. I've chosen to use a view instead. Workaround 3 would be to actually send a message up to the route and then use use render. So render implies that we have a controller, and once we have a controller, we can find that controller inside of the route using controller for. So now I can pluck off the controller, and I can call update preview on it, and let that part of the page update. Or I can do another workaround where I instead use outlets. So now I'm going to click preview. When I click preview, it comes up to the actions on my route, calls preview, pulls off my application and my post-preview controllers, and then sets the preview or the markdown based on the application body. And that renders then into an outlet. We can use render template to render that into an outlet. So we've got like 4 different strategies for how we could actually execute on that thing, that interaction that we needed to create. So when we pick between these options, when we choose what we do in the DOM, we're actually making design decisions. We're deciding how I'm going to put the parts of my application together. And each of those have different implications. If I use a component, I'll have lots of reusability. How will it affect my reusability as an action? Like, can I use this action in other parts of the DOM, or can I only use it in this one template? If I have internals in preview, do my internals involve a controller, or are they only involving a view? Like, do I actually need the controller? So this kind of decides our architecture. So this is kind of the thesis of my thought process here, is that architecture in Ember apps are dictated by your routes and your templates. A lot of people presume they feel like it's in their controllers, or it's something not related to the HTML, but I really feel like they're very closely related. So they decide how actions propagate through, and they scope things, and they're subject to external constraints. They're subject to external constraints because templates are dictated to partially by design. So your HTML is going to need to react to design. So you're going to have this constraint of, they said that this thing had to be in a separate row. That means that the preview button can't be part of the same component as the thing doing the previewing. You have to deal with that. You have to find a way to cross that chasm. And when you're talking about routes, which are the other part of what I think dictates architecture, routes are dictated by what you want the actual URL to look like and how much complexity you want to encapsulate in it. So the other 2 parts of this, I'm going to go over instead in kind of detail here. How actions go up and down the controller tree, which has changed a little bit recently, but is really nice and consistent now. And scoping access to dependencies. So this first one. So actions. How many people are already familiar with this? I'm really curious. How many people use actions and bubbling? Okay, cool. So we're going to talk about bubbling. So first thing is bubbling, and there's a big warning here, because unless you're using RC8 or 1.0, which everyone is, of course, then this probably isn't going to work as well as it is here. Luke Malia did a bunch of awesome work to unify this interface to give us this actions hash, which you can send events to. It has bubbles in a very consistent way, and we're going to see how that works. Before that, there was the events hash, and the events hash had kind of an idiosyncratic different behavior if you were in routes or if you were in controllers. It was very inconsistent, a little bit frustrating to use, but the basic ideas are still the same. So in RC8, we got this thing called the action handler. So action handler is a mixin. We can add it to any object. So here I'm going to define an object and extend it with the action handler mixin. I'm going to create a target, and I'm going to send that target a message. And it comes back and it says nothing happened. Pretty good. So if we actually make this do something, we can define actions. So now I have my actionable, which is still just our object that's been extended. And I define vgates on it, and I go ahead and call send on it, and I get back dunkagoop. So we really just have this way. Right now it seems like a glorified way to call a function, right? There's nothing too special going on here. It gets a little bit more special when we have two different targets. So I have an actionable, and this is my second target, and it has an action. It comes back undir, and I have a first target, and it comes back with dunkagoop. It has a target of the second target. I call on the first target vgates, and it comes back with this dunkagoop from right here. So it didn't actually do anything with the second target, right? It was just a function. Because it's there, it didn't need to pass on to the second target. If we had called true and returned true from it, then it would have bubbled. So it would have continued through the other target and called on that target as well. So now we can call it, and we get dunkagoop, and we get undir. First we bubble into the first target, and then we get true, so we bubble into the second target. On this, we're going to go ahead and, what am I doing on this one? Totally forgot. So we call vgates here. We don't actually define it with anything on line 14 here. So we're going to say that vgates is null. There is no value for this thing. Or we could have just left actions out altogether. And when we do that and call send vgates, it just bubbles straight through on its own. We don't need to return true or anything like that. We have this hierarchy where we can send things, and they will bubble up through all of the targets. And this is how controllers and routes actually work in Ember. If you send a message, first it will go to the controllers, and it will try and bubble through all the controllers and their parent controllers until it gets to the leaf route, and then it will go ahead and bubble through all the routes as well. And you can control that bubbling by returning true if you want to force it to continue, or if you just handle something, then it will stop as soon as you handle it. So all these things handle actions, although they don't all bubble in the same way. So controllers and routes have targets, so they know how to bubble up through the stack. These other two guys here, views and components, they have actions, and you can send things to them. Like we did that on the first workaround where we called an action that had a name, and we gave it the target of the other component. That other component can have an actions hash that handles messages being sent to it. However, they don't bubble in those cases. Only controllers and routes actually have a bubbling setup. So the other really important thing to understand about this part of the architecture is that routes are kind of state machines. I don't know how many people still remember the old router, but the old router, not the old router, the old router.
2 old, 3 old?
Yeah, the old router was a giant state machine. And what this meant was as you went from route to route, you could think of them as nested states. So if I'm on /cars and I have another route that's /boats, when I go to cars, I'm in the state of cars. When I go to boats, I'm in the state of boats. If I go to cars/buy, I'm in a state of cars.by is the state that my state machine is in. So you have these nested state machines that kind of mirror the actual layout in your routes. So this is a state machine in the Ember-states package, which is no longer part of proper Ember. But we have a state machine. It has an initial state of good, and this is our good. And then it has a state of bad that it can be sent to, put into. And it in turn has a couple functions on it, goots and goots here. So if I take my mood manager and I send it goot, it's going to come back and say, yeah, because the initial state was good. If I transition into bad, which is going to be this guy, and I send it goot, I get 9. And then if I transition to quiet, I get this error that gets raised. And this is very similar to the way that routes actually work in Ember. In a similar parallel to that state machine, you have a couple states. I have a route of good, bad, and quiet. These can all be thought of as states that my router is in. And then I have a good route that has actions, and I have a bad route that has actions as well. Then I have a quiet route that doesn't have it. In this application, as you went to the good, and then if you clicked on this action goot, it would fire on the good routes. If you clicked on this link to bad, it would fire on the bad routes. And this is application, so it's always going to be there. All right? So our router is acting like a state machine, deciding what the message of goot actually means. And when we do this, we're always going to have actions hitting the leaf route state. So regardless of where the action is called from, if it's called from the application template or some other template, it will always end up on our leaf route state. So if I'm in the quiet state, if I'm on the quiet route, it will always fire to the quiet route, no matter what template it's actually part of. However, the template itself will decide which controllers will see that action. So if I'm in the application controller, I'll never actually get to this thing in good controller, even if I'm on the good route. Even if the good controller exists and is hooked up, because this is the application template, we'll never actually get to the good controller. So actions on controllers and routes, I think they don't have any practical difference. It's really a matter of when you want to be able to use them. So when you put them on the controller, they're going to be coupled to your template. So if you think that this controller is going to be reused a couple times and that this action would be reused, then it seems like an action that you would want to put on the controller because you're going to be instantiating that controller over and over again. If it's like a page controller, like if you're going to the good route and you don't think you're ever going to use that thing for anything except for going to the good route, then putting the actions on there means that you're coupling it to the template, which can feel a little bit more awkward. If you're doing an action on a controller and it forces the use of needs, if suddenly you need access to another controller, I think that's usually a smell. Usually you shouldn't need to put something in needs just so you can handle an action for that thing. And then on routes, they can be handled from any template on a page. It's kind of the most powerful one of these. So if you do have something like a modal, then you can just call that action to open the modal from anywhere, and it'll always hit the route. And you don't need to worry about implementing that action on all the controllers that are tied to it. So just choose where to put an action and think about these things beforehand, like what am I coupling myself to when I create an action? Am I coupling myself to the template, or am I coupling this to the page itself? So the second thing, which is much smaller than it used to be, is that it scopes access to dependencies. So the only good example I could come up with this, for this right now is targets. So if you specify a view name, then you're saying that preview is on the parent view. And so you're scoping this particular instance of this component onto the parent view and saying it's only going to be available there, which means you can only target it from other things within that same template. That's really the only instance, the only example I can come up with of scoping something based on the template. And this is kind of what has access to different things. Components have access to nothing. Views can access their parent view or their controller. Controllers can access the target. And the target is going to either be your parent controller, or it's going to be a route itself. And it's kind of up into the air as to whether or not you should really be using target to access information, but it is there. And you can, of course, pull in other controllers via needs, and you can, all routes can access all controllers via controller for models. And this just shows that controllers are really complicated. Controllers have a lot of power, right? They can reach into lots of different parts of the app and handle a lot of different situations. So you can cheat on these scopes with register and inject. Register and inject give you a way to break that scoping that's built into default Ember things. So here I'm going to create an app, and then we register controller:session with app session controller. So I'm saying there's going to be a controller called session controller, and by default it will be a singleton. And I'm going to inject it onto route. By saying route, I'm actually injecting it onto all routes, not just any one particular route, but any route that exists. I want it to be called a property of session, and I want to use the instance of the thing that is controller:session. And this bends the rules because now this session controller is available on all routes. So I can just access it here as this.get inside of the route, and it will always be present on all routes. So if you have something like current user and stuff, this is a really good way to bend the rules to make those things available everywhere without needing to constantly be doing controller for and looking them up by hand. And you could do something similar and inject session onto all views or something crazier if you wanted to be able to do that. So again, the main goal is that this dictates part of your architecture, right? When you were in that solution before and you were thinking, do I want to use a component? Do I want to use render or a view, or do I just want to use the template helper? You're kind of deciding what the architecture for your app is and what you're going to have access to later on and how this thing is going to be reusable. So when I'm confused about an app and I'm looking at something for the first time and I'm not quite sure how things are wired together, I always tend to look at the templates first because they contain this information about what the scopes are, and look at the routes because the routes give you an idea of what has to look at what. The controllers themselves shouldn't be having a lot of this information. They have lots and lots of features, but when you make them clever, they can get really confusing. So I'm going to step through a couple examples of how controllers are often can be abused, and then some cleanups for those things by looking at routes and templates. So here's one example. We have a books controller, and it needs a library, and then it has content of a compute alias over to books. And this belies like a couple of problems. One is that we've assumed that we have a library, right? The books controller now says there will always be a library attached to me. We can't just have a bunch of books lying around on their own, disconnected without a library. We've made an assumption about the library controller itself, that the library knows about books. So that's another tight coupling that we have. And we've assumed that that we're not going to be attached to a route. Basically, that content itself will not be overwritten by something else. You said that I always know what content is, and nobody else is going to go messing with that on me. And this creates like a really tight coupling of the books controller over to the library controller. Ember has a really, really simple cleanup for this. There's something called Model 4. So Model 4 will go ahead and look at, actually I'm trying to think of exactly how the internals work right now, and I realize I don't know. But it will look at your parent routes. So if we're at /library1/books, we're in the books route, so we'll look up at the library and find whatever library is the current library using Model 4, and then we can pull the books off of it. So in this, we haven't actually touched the other controller at all. We don't know anything about the controller, and we haven't coupled books and library together. All that we've done is use the relationship that exists at the model level and use the router. So another kind of classic one is that you have a tabbed area of your page. So down here I've got some tabs, and they've got some actions, and then I have a couple different things that I want to be open. So if I'm signing in, then I want this sign-in template, and if I'm signing up, then I want this sign-up template. And now I have to manage, sorry guys, I know this might be a little bit small back there. If I want to toggle these things, I have to call open sign-in and open sign-up. They'll go onto my session controller, because this is my session template. They'll go on to actions, and I can open sign-in here, which is going to close all the other ones, because I had to have a spot where I could set all these flags to false, and then I'm going to set the sign-up open to be true. So, I mean, you can easily get yourself into this situation, but obviously it's not good, right? There's serious issues here. Amongst them is that new panels need to be added on the controller. Our controller has to know about all the panels that could exist, which seems kind of awkward, and have explicit actions for dealing with all of them. And the new panels also need to be added in the template. So we have this odd coupling of all these things that I need to specify in the template and all these things I need to specify in the controller that need to tie to each other. Along with that, panels can't be controlled from other scopes. So someone comes along and they suddenly want to have another part of the application change which one of those things is showing. There's no way to do that. Or they want to change what's in the sign-up. Yeah, or they want to change these, and you need to add them all over the place. So a good way to clean this up is to use named outlets. So now I just have these actions down here, and we've even added a little bit of complexity because now this understands which one is active, which one of these tabs is active. I have an outlet called panel, and I just have a bunch of actions that call open panel, and then they specify a name. So this one says I want to open the panel, and it passes an argument of sign-in. When I get up to the actions, we just have one action called open panel. It looks at the controller, and this is on the route again, not on the controller. It looks at the controller and sets the open panel to be whatever panel was passed in, and that's just a string, remember. Down here we have these flags, and these are our flags for which one is the current one selected, and we're using a computed equal to say when the open panel path is equal to sign in, I want to be true. When the open panel path is equal to sign up, I want to be true. These are going to be mutually exclusive because open panel can only have one value. So we still have a quick way to say which one of these is active and not have a conflict with any of the other spots. And then to keep this outlet really flexible, so that we're not hard coding anything, we just go ahead and take the panel name that we passed in and render panels / and then whatever the panel name is. So the panels directory will have a list of all of our panel templates, and we'll go ahead and render into session, which is the template that you want to render into, which would be this one, and then the name of the outlet that we have, which is panel, which lines up with the panel name right here. So we've created this really dynamic system. Now if I want to add a new panel, all I need to do is maybe add a new state if it has a button. But if it doesn't have a button, I don't even need to add a state, and these will all just turn false automatically. And I can also call this open panel from a different spot in the application. I don't need to call this open panel from just here. I can put other things into this panel from other parts of my application. Okay, so a third one is something that looks pretty innocent and then comes back to bite you. So this is an index route. We have a model, it's got a couple things in it, and we're looping through it down here. We're kicking out each name. Awesome, great. And we run our code, and instead of getting our cheeses, we get apple invasions. And we don't see why until we look at the controller, where some guys come in and added a fruit invasion onto our item controller. And then we have a controller for fruit invasion that's rewriting the name property. And this creates this like frustrating code situation where you can look at the route, which is supposed to tell you what the model is, which tells you what the list of things is. And then you can look at the template itself, which is going to just iterate through those and tells you what it's doing. But you don't actually have an idea of what's going on because someone's used the power that's present inside of controllers to work around the normal behavior. So the cleanest thing that I like to do for this is to encourage you to use the item controller argument to each instead of using it on the wrapper controller. So here they're specifying that fruit invasion is an item controller, and then we walk name. So now it's very clear just from looking at the route and looking at the template what's really happening. I can see that, I'm looping through some other controller, and then I can find that and look up the actual behavior of what's going on. So controllers are super, super powerful, but I think you should use them with like great care, and their features with great care. Usually there's better ways to think about your architecture that involve the router and using a different kind of construct in the template that you can use to not surprise yourself so much. So don't work so hard in controllers, and look to your routes and your templates for the application architecture. I think when you're diving into an existing app or when you're starting a new app, that's a good way to think about things and think less about what's happening in my views and controllers and how they specify things. That's pretty much it.
Q&A. I'll just ask you to repeat the question for the video. Questions from Matthew? I'll start off with one. You were talking a little bit about the action bubbling being different views and component controllers and routes. Definitely agree with you about components. Views, I think, work the same. I'm not sure if there's something specific.
Works the same as components. Yeah,
views work the same as closer to controllers and routers.
Maybe you know better than me. I don't believe so.
They have a target.
They do?
Yeah. The target is the
yeah.
controller.
Oh, that's right. Okay. Yeah, so that's an interesting point. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Yeah. So components, because they are their own controller as well. They are both their own view and their own controller and their own. Well, they're not their own target, but they're their own everything. The action has nowhere to go. It's like inside of a box. But views themselves do actually have a target, which is going to be the controller. So if you send an action to a view, then it should bubble first onto the controller and then through the rest of the controllers and out to the route. But it doesn't behave like controllers in that your event would not propagate from view to view. Your nested views don't all get to see this event. It's only the current view and then the controller immediately attached to it.
Do you see the use of parent view as a code smell, or are there legitimate uses of that? Like a view calling its parent?
I think when you're trying to, sorry, yeah, the question was, is there a legitimate use of parent view, or is that something that's kind of a code smell? So parent view is when you're in a view, you have the ability to take your view, or you can arbitrarily say parent view and continue to look up at the parents of each view that you look at. You have access to that whole hierarchy of things. And in turn, each view also has access to child views, which is all of the views that are attached to it, regardless of how they're attached. If they're attached, one's attached with render and one's attached with view itself, then you get all the child views. I think if you have things that are true siblings, then it makes sense. I think it's usually nice to try to encapsulate them. So if you have like two components that are part of a UI, so say a button for a dropdown and then the content of the dropdown itself, those may need to communicate with each other to create a certain UI interaction that you want to create. If you can, I think it's nice to encapsulate that inside of like a third component that wraps the two of them, just so you know that they're not going to leak out of that scope. I think if you're using it a lot inside of your normal like page level controllers, page level templates and stuff, then that's probably a smell. But I think in the right compartmentalized spots, it definitely is a good tool to use. Cool. Well, thank you very much, guys.
Awesome. Cool. We're going to do lightning talks and demos next. So I'm going to ask Jonathan Goldman, wherever he is, to come get set up here. And I forgot to do something that I usually do at the top, which is just open up to the group about announcements. These can be if your team is hiring for Ember stuff, if you're looking for work. I will start with one announcement of my own. Yap is recently, we've had an informal kind of internship and apprentice program. Two of the quote-unquote graduates of that program are here tonight, and they're both doing very well and being very successful. We have a slot for somebody new. So if you're at a stage in your career where, or just at the beginning where you're looking to apprentice with a team that's very strong in Ember, please talk to me. So we're going to bring a chair up. This one looks like it's free. And the next demo I'm going to introduce, just to say that Jonathan Goldman is a longtime member of the New York Ember community. He's going to show you how to do. He's going to show you how to do something with Ember that you probably shouldn't be doing. But now I'm excited to introduce again Jonathan Goldman, and I think you're going to like what he's got to show you.
Hello, everybody. I'm going to need a non-squeamish volunteer who doesn't mind having their brain hooked up to a piece of medical equipment. Stefan, come on in. So my beautiful assistant here, Jake, is going to connect you. Well, you're the subject. So while Jake's hooking him up, I will get started. So this talk is called Using Ember.js Where You Probably Shouldn't, but where you can and you should. So a lot of people assume that because you're creating a web application, there's some things that you can't do or that you shouldn't do, but the fact is you can and you should. So what we're going to do now is So I'm going to start a new recording, and fingers crossed this goes okay. Flatline, right?
Can you zoom a little?
There we go. Right.
Someone was asking
So Stefan's going to watch a video, and hopefully we should see some interesting things happen while he's watching it. So this is actually his brain data being streamed from a Bluetooth device, which is connected to this computer, and you're seeing it live in the browser. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to record 4 seconds of his brain.
Very boring.
So this is refresh. Okay, so we've done that, and now we can pull up his brain data, and this is not really that interesting, unfortunately. But you've got to believe me here when I tell you this did come from his brain. So what's happening here is we're actually talking to a device locally on the machine. We're streaming in brain data, we're storing it on the local disk, and then we're serving up in an Ember application which lives in the cloud. And then at this point, I can hopefully, internet capabilities, working. So I just uploaded that just now. So now his brain data is in the cloud and is viewable from any machine. Hopefully. Or not. Internet is very slow. There we go. So to sort of give you a more interesting demo, so just sort of a quick, I'm going to put on a demo device which shows slightly more streams. So if we were using the full headset, so we just hooked you up to 2 electrodes, which gives you 1 stream. But if we had hooked him up to the full headset, this is what you would see. You would see, this is actual brain data that we pre-recorded, but this is this is what you'll see. You see 8 streams coming in off of the local machine. So you may be wondering why we want to do this. So what is Octopus? Octopus is a web-based biometrics platform that allows you to record, visualize, store, and analyze brain data. For researchers, it's pretty useful. For medical professionals, it also has usages. But also for us, the thing that we're focusing on is marketing. So we can take this brain data, post-process it, and at the end of it, allow you to ascertain sentiment. So if we'd run an experiment, we would have recorded Stefan's brain while he watched the video, and afterwards we could tell you if it held his attention, and if so, how much. And also for other business. So
Wired up your employees, right? Oh, look, lost focus. It's on Reddit again.
So how does this work? We're kind of cheating a little bit. So for you to pull up the status bar up here, we run an application on the local machine which opens a local host WebSocket and allows us to stream data from localhost into our application. I did this in MS Paint, so forgive me for that. But what you can see is this is our Octopus connector, the orange box. And the red box, the red line is our brain data that's streaming in over a data bus. And the control bus allows us to control this device. So we're doing it all over WebSockets. We chose WebSockets because there are fewer issues with cores and other such things. But you could probably use the same technique to access a locally running web server if you had set up the right headers and stuff. And then, so we have that connection from the local host to a Rails application through the browser. And that's the kind of thing that wouldn't have been possible unless we were using Ember. So I thought I'd put up a bit of code. So what we do is stuff like, if we go bus.send, start streaming, and it all uses promises, and allows you to then start streaming straight into the graph. And you can even hook it into stuff like Ember Model. So if we go back here and go to recordings, this is accessing the local hard drive. So these are actual recordings on the local machine. So a lot of researchers that we have spoken to said that they don't want to upload their stuff to the cloud, they want it locally. And for that, this is one of those features. And if we were to
What's the size number? Like
that's bytes.
Okay, I was just curious. Not many bytes there.
These are very short recordings. So if we quit this, then you'll see that we'll disconnect from it, and then you'll lose that ability to see those recordings. So this all uses, like I said, promises. It all uses real simple WebSocket stuff that anyone could throw together. I managed it, so we will be capable. So this is, you create a WebSocket, you send a message to it. You have to have a correlation ID so you can correlate the request to the response. And this is sort of the secret sauce, is that when you get a message back from the WebSocket, you can work out how to handle it based upon, if it's a string, then it's just a JSON blob and you can do something with it. Or if it's an instance of blob, then you're getting binary data. So one thing that's worth showing as well is that if I quit it. So clicking on one of these actually pulls up the data that we recorded from the hard drive. Yeah, that's interesting. So why did we decide to do it this way? Because we can, and because it was fun. For me, Ember is one of those technologies where it allows you to sell a vision to somebody who would otherwise not be able to think outside of the browser. The browser is an incredibly powerful platform, and stuff like Ember allows you to have these stateful applications and give people real desktop experiences that they wouldn't otherwise be able to get elsewhere. So that's it, very short. Thank you for listening. That's me on top, Johnny at Twitter, Jake is the second one, and then we have Nick, who's not here unfortunately, and the last one is our product, Twitter, if any of you care to subscribe. So that's it.
If anybody has questions, what does the book say? question in the back there?
What's the app that runs locally, and whatever that app is, could you actually get this running on like an iOS device?
What is the app that's running locally, and could you get it running on an iOS device? So it's an application written in Go that just opens a local WebSocket. I'm not sure if you could get it running on iOS. You probably could, maybe, but you would need to be able to run two apps at the same time, both the browser on the iOS device and the service. But I think if you were to go the route of doing like a Chrome packaged app, which I'm against from various reasons other than ideological reasons, you could probably access the hardware in the same way, but this is a way of doing it without imposing all that stuff on everybody.
Cool. Awesome. Thanks a lot, guys. Good, Michael, to set up.
Could you? I'm having a demo.
Okay.
So if you could.
All right, we're going to move on to, is JP around? JP Sanchez? All right, come on up, JP. So earlier tonight you heard from Russ Cherry, who's the CTO here at Booker. He mentioned there's some Ember.js code being written here. JP is going to show us some of that code. And specifically the very high-level overview, without spoiling any of his demo, is that if you ever had to serve custom layouts or a custom form where you don't know up front what the fields are going to be, and you want that to be configurable by your end user, this is a challenge that I think Booker's faced, and show you a little bit about how that works. So JP Sanchez.
Thanks, Luke. I'm just going to do a quick. First, I'm going to do a quick slide presentation here, just to give you a kind of idea of what, like a unique way I guess we use Ember here. So let me start this off. All right, so we do like these, we make these dynamic forms available. Yeah. So we use like these dynamic forms in some of our apps. We'll basically have like two main apps that we use Ember here at Booker, and so they both make use of this like functionality that we created. So basically, what is a dynamic form, right? So this is like a typical, like a regular form that you would have in Ember, right? You would have some kind of like binding to a couple like inputs that bind to like a model on a controller, like first name, last name, and some kind of checkbox here, allowed or receive email or SMS. So what if like you have a model that doesn't have like concrete properties, right? Let's say you have like, it has this one property that has like field values that aren't like concrete properties on the JSON object. So basically that's what we have. Some of our data model looks like this, and so what exactly is this, right? We have like some text value here that has like some text there, and it's a Boolean value that has like a true here, and in these keys, that second key should actually be like key 2 or something. Not one, but so what are these things, right? So what gives these random like field values like context, right? So we have these like we have another concept here of like page layouts. So you can create like these dynamic page layouts that basically hook up to each customer's like dynamic data. And so basically some of the things that, some of the properties of these layouts are like, what kind of like field it is, the label for the field, like its position in the layout, that kind of stuff. So what we need to do is, we combine these layouts with the field values. And so when we pull down like a customer, we have the layout available to us too, and we do like we combine these two kind of like data structures or objects, and we end up with a like 2-dimensional array. Basically, like it's what you're seeing here is an array of arrays. It's 2-dimensional, and we have so like for the first row here, this would be like one row right here. So it would be like field 1, column 1, and field 2 would be like in column 2, and then so forth. This would be, the next array would be like row 2, and then field 3 would be in column 1, and field 4 would be in column 2. So now that we have the dynamic, we have the data structure, right? Now we want to be able to like display this in a form. So, what we ended up using was a collection view. So it's a collection view that's taken in this first array, and then its item view is actually also a collection view. So that way we can, display these fields the way we want to, and what we make use of here. So these fields can we have like a bunch of different type of fields, like single text edit, like we have like paragraph text fields, which are like text areas, checkboxes, selects, all that kind of stuff. We also have like address field is another like more complex kind of field. Like an email field that has its own set of properties. So we use like this create child view hook of the collection view, and so it allows us to, as the collection view is rendering like its child views, we can take a look at like we can take a look at the content that we're passing in, and we can go ahead and like use some kind of switch statement to then choose which view it's supposed to render at that moment in time as it's going through each individual item in the array. So that's my last slide. So we're gonna go to the demo now, and just give me a second here. We're gonna log in. Okay, so basically, what you're seeing here is we have this concept of like booking qualifications, and that's what these fields up here are. So with these field views and stuff, we have a concept of we can have like a read-only kind of view of it, which that's what this is. It's just a read-only view where you can't actually edit any of the fields, and they tie together with some so that the administrator of a brand or like or a spa can kind of like set up their qualifications, what's important to them, right? So to their business, what kind of fields they want to like. It's really important to them, and so these qualifications what they end up doing is kind of filtering what kind of service is available for somebody. So, for example, this guy's this example like business is like a software like dev class kind of business, right? They provide a service of like tutoring to kids or adult or up from elementary all the way up to like maybe beginning college or something. And so basically, this is an example of a parent coming in here and like going ahead and booking something for their child, and this child happens to be 7 years old, so they have like this elementary intro to C#, for example. That's like their kind of like like the tutoring available to them. So I just changed my child now to like a second child of mine that might be like 17 years old, right? So in that case, what we did there was we filtered that out and got a different service for this guy. So I just made like a simple example here. There's not many services in this location and stuff, but you get the idea. You can add a bunch of services and be able to filter all this stuff out. Anyways, let me show you like more of the the dynamic field kind of stuff here. So say I wanted to add like a new child, right? So this layout kind of corresponds to all the qualifications. So when you want to create like a new child or something, you want to like make it required to fill in the fields that are important to your business, right? So that's kind of like what you see here. And we have a form here. And this is all dynamic in the sense where, this layout could be changed at any time. We can add more qualifications later on if you wanted to, and all that kind of stuff. So you can come in here, select the birth date in here. So there we created a new child. He's here now, and we can go ahead and like book for him. Since he's passed a certain like threshold of age, he can, this is like the service that's available to him. Go ahead and search for availability. Okay. So now we got availability here. This is like, we're using another like collection view here. This is all done in Ember. So you get like this automatic stuff here. This is like for if like this service had like add-ons, it's not related to the fields, but some other functionality we provide. So here's like these are the fields, but now disabled because it's part of the business logic that we don't want to, after you select these things and book something, you don't want that to go to edit it while they're booking. But we made so we can set like a property on the collection view that kind of like goes ahead and like we can set certain properties, like if it's read only, if it's disabled, you want to disable other fields. Those are things you can set at the at the collection view level, and it'll propagate down to all the children. Anyways, let's finish this booking. Oops. Except this. Okay, so we finished the booking here. So we create a new child in here, and you'll see. So besides the booking flow and all this, we also have. And I'll show you. This will show you more of like the dynamic fields. You can. So this is like the account kind of administration part for a customer. They can come in here and like mess with their fields. This is the actual parent itself. The fields you see below this checkbox here are all the dynamic fields that came from combining like the field values with the layout. And let me show you that. So I have a brand here set up. Let me log back in. So, the brand administrator can come in here and go ahead and administer what these layouts look like. So one day maybe the business like requirements change for them. Like there's some extra fields that are more important to them. So they can come in here and modify their layout. So they can take away. Let's say they want to take away this. They don't want this. Maybe they don't want this this divisor anymore. They can save this. Go ahead in here and refresh this. You see that. Actually, I never scrolled that far down. Like that's gone now. That bottom part, and I can take away some other fields or add more fields. For example, let's just take away this stuff. For example, save that. Okay. So you'll see now that that bottom section's gone now. And so it respects like whatever they end up configuring. The same goes for besides the parent, you can set up the children's kind of layouts. So it goes by customer type. So you can have different customer types. This one corresponds to this guy here. You see this layout kind of corresponds to what you see in here. This would be the new child I just made through the booking flow. This is a field that's not really a booking qualification, but it is part of the this layout. So you can save that. I guess one of the more complex fields we have besides these kind of basic form elements is we have this concept of repeatable field sets. So this right here is an example. Let's say, I don't know, it's important to give your kid a snack or something while they're there. You can provide the snack and just tell them, okay, this is whatever the snack name is and the amount. This is totally configurable. This field set, you can put any fields you want in there and be able to add multiple of these. So you can add another snack. And this is all dynamic too. This is a dynamic form element. You'll see here the layout. This is the customer flow layout. And you'll see that it has the child snacks here, the phone number field, the language experience, the divider that's here. That stuff will would be here, and you could save that. And that's pretty much it for the dynamic fields. There's other stuff, I guess, kind of really talks about this like project, but there's other things in here that are pretty cool. Like these, you can upload photos for your customers and all this kind of stuff. That's right for another talk.
Awesome. One question for JP. Any questions? Okay, awesome. So, yeah, sir.
So, have you thought about a strategy around doing responsive UI? Like,
Oh yeah. Well, actually, this.
Repeat the question, JP.
Oh yeah. So the question is, have we thought of any strategies to make this like responsive? So. Yeah. It's, so if we go back to, we're currently working on that, and mostly like this booking flow, this couple pages I showed you at the beginning, is what's responsive right now. So if I were to collapse this a little bit further, let's see. Kind of like goes into this mode. This is the responsive mode, and you can select the service in here. You can see same kind of stuff, and we did this mostly, through like just CSS, like media queries and stuff like that. There was a few spots where we had to like use like event listeners to notice, to listen to like the actual media query getting below a certain threshold, and doing some things there here and there. So it's pretty robust when you also have like this responsive stuff. So, and this would be like the appointment history we saw earlier when it's fully expanded on the right side.
Cool.
So,
All right. Is Michael, you're set? All right, let's get set. While Michael's getting set up, I would just invite everybody to stand up and take a little stretch.
Hi, I'm John. It's like a big brother. I got
All right, let's find our seats. We're going to get moving again. let's get going. Our next speaker is a dad. He's also one of the YAP graduates that I referred to earlier. I've had the great pleasure of working with Michael for a while and of seeing him learn Ember, express his passion about a lot of topics, including karaoke, just FYI. And he recently told me about an app that he made to help his kids learn math, and I said, oh, you should definitely demo this. So, Michael Madrid.
Thank you, Luke. Yes, my name is Michael Madrid. I am currently working at Customer.io, which they do email campaigns and allow you to segment your customers and send based on various things. Very interesting product. If any of you came to last month's meeting, you may have heard that they were looking for people. So luckily, Luke had worked with the head tech guy there, so he set up an interview, or a meeting, I should say, and things happen very quickly. As mentioned, I was working with Luke and everyone else at YAP. That was for about 6 months. I approached them after the, I think it was the February meetup where I gave a small presentation. It is very intense there. You get very high-level people, so it's not like you'll go there from 9 to 5 or 10 to 6 is what they usually do, and then go home and just de-stress and relax. Depending on your level, of course, but there's a lot to learn there. I had to put in a lot of hard work to really get up to speed. So, but it's a great experience if you're willing to put in that effort. Anyway, okay. So over the recent break, well, I had a break. I guess it wasn't a long break, but I have a pair of 3.5-year-old twins, and we've been learning addition. I've been thinking of ways to really explain. How do you explain 3 plus 2 to someone who doesn't have the concept of plus? So I thought maybe visualization would be something I could try. So I'll teach my kids basic math, basic addition to start. Technique, use visualization. I am not an educator, and I don't know if this is a good technique, but I figured, try to get them to get the concept, and then, obviously you don't want them 10 years down the road still visualizing things in their mind when they're adding 3 plus 2, but I figured in the beginning it'd be okay, and then try to take it away at some point. That's a later project. So this is my customer base, Julius and Isabella. And I will show you the app. That's what I need to do. Okay, this is the app. Julius, Isabella. This is configurable, by the way, just in case you want to use this and don't want to rename your children. Fairly simple. As you see, there's a equation here, and I thought having actual things you could count make this easier. So Isabella, in the beginning, she would see 4 plus 4. 4 was a very common thing she would say. So that is too low. So then I tried to get her, the boy Julius, he pretty much picked it up, not almost immediately, but almost immediately. And then the good thing was afterwards he would actually repeat the whole equation at the end. So he would say 4 plus 4 equals 8. Now you can see there are some transitions going on, and that's something I'm going to talk a little bit about. So anyway, that is the app. Let's see. Oh, where'd we go? Oh, okay, good, nice. Stuff actually works. Okay, so how did we do this? This is an Ember 1.0 app. It was built using the Ember App Kit, which is the brainchild of Mr. Stefan Penner sitting over there. For those of you who don't know, he, in addition to Ember, he loves hockey and dog sledding and maple syrup because he is in fact from Winnipeg, which is in Manitoba, right? In Canada. Oh, and he also loves Native Canadians. Anyway.
I do.
He does.
Not racist.
He's not. He's not. Oh, I thought I took out the slide. That's actually, there we go. Sorry. Nice. Oh yeah, that's right. I lost connectivity. I took the slide out, but I couldn't take it out. Then I didn't. Okay, so the Ember App Kit. If you're coming from like a Rails world, you're used to just writing something in, your favorite in Sass and CoffeeScript, having your server automatically reload your code, rebuild your project, and it just works. So Ember hasn't historically had anything like this, but the Ember App Kit is something which is going towards that, and it works a lot better than anything else. I mean, it really saves you a lot of time. Among the things it gives you project structure, modules, building with all your favorite things like CoffeeScript, Sass, Emblem. Sitting next to Stefan is Alex Machnier, who did Emblem. You'll see a little Emblem in a while. Testing, and also gives you a nice server so you can just develop and see things in the browser very easily. I guess we'll just do a tiny little thing. So this is the actual one of the tasks down here. Come on. Why is this? Not. Interesting. Sorry. Okay, so this will give you a server process. Probably. There's still things to learn from the master. Okay, I don't think we need that. Okay, so for instance, you could, if you want, instead of having the buttons here be blue, I think that's supposed to be blue, but if you want them to be red, for instance, you could make them red. You could save your file, and you'll notice your process is being watched, done without errors, and then you could try this again. Whoa! Isn't that amazing? I didn't have to restart anything. I didn't have to say, convert my Sass into CSS. I worked with CoffeeScript and Emblem 2, which you'll see in a second. Okay, I think now it's just a presentation. Okay, so how did we do this? Funny you'd ask. One thing is Ember components, which is a fairly new thing to Ember. This is just the blurb. Wouldn't it be great if you could define your own application-specific HTML tags and then implement their behavior using JavaScript? So I think, as mentioned before, components kind of a conglomerate between a view and a controller, you could say. It has various features. I look at the documentation, but the idea is it allows you to encapsulate behavior in a nice way. This is an example of a component. As you see, the Ember thing is an answer button component. These are the buttons, as you saw, which you click on it and they move around. Some of them disappear. So, is disappeared, nice term there, but it kind of fits because if it is disappeared, the state of disappeared. Once you're in answered state, so answered state is after a button has been clicked and someone is given an answer. If you're in an answer state, and if the button does not have, let's see, is correct, right. So if the button is not this is actually, I think, what is clicked, then that button will disappear, okay? This is the template file. This is the way you would call answer button in your template. If you're using handlebars, you'll have the squiggly braces. This is emblem. You do not need squiggly braces. You do not need to say, have another each down here. Is there anyone who prefers to write 3 lines versus 2 lines? Most people south of like the Canadian border prefer. I guess back in the day, IBM used to pay their coders based on line, I believe. So maybe they preferred that. I much prefer this.
By the character.
By the character, yes. As you see, action, verify, answer. So when you send this action, all you see here is action. You don't see verify, answer. But that you can set in your template. So if you want to have another template element where you want to send something else, you can do that. Answer and is answered state, those both actually get tied to what's called the equation controller, which you'll see a little later. Just makes things very, very easy. You just set that up and then don't have to worry. CSS transforms is another part of this puzzle. This is not Ember specific, but basically what it allows you to do is when you change class names, it will transition based on a time. Those transitions that you saw before, they're happening in 1 second. The width is transforming. The background color, that's how I'm making things actually disappear. That's something I would like to improve on, but that was best for now. I'll just show you once again. Pay attention to the transition. So if I click on 6, all the other buttons disappeared because basically their background color was set to white. They are actually there, and that's why there's this space over here, which I want to get rid of, but haven't been able to yet. That's something which anyone who wants to help out, by all means, feel free. Okay, so once again, okay, so that's the CSS transforms. This is just pretty much summing everything up. You have the answer button, you click on it with an action, goes to this answer button component, it sends action, it disappears, sets the state of these buttons. The action goes to this controller, the equations controller, area verify answer. It sets the answer, which is part of what makes the button disappear, and also the is answered state, which also does that. There are other elements like messages. You saw when an answer has been given, this message will appear, and this once again is, as you see, this button is disappeared. This tells the button what to do and makes that transition in those 1,000 milliseconds, commonly known as 1 second. Here we go, and here's the transition. Okay, so that's basically summing up everything which is going on. They liked it. Yeah, I was really wondering if they were just going to look at it and never ask for it again, but they did actually ask for it again. It was a previous version which didn't have the nice transitions. I don't know if those are now too distracting. I haven't tried it with them, but want to try that. You do, if you're doing something like this with kids, you can't just put it in front of them and say, okay, click buttons. You have to say, oh, well, maybe you should try counting the balls instead of just looking at the first number before the plus sign and giving the answer. These are things which, seem very obvious to an adult, but not to a kid. One thing I would like to do, as I said, kind of wean them off counting. What they do with the balls is, 2 plus 3, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. I'd like them to get to the point where it's like 2, 3, 4, 5, where they realize they can start at one place and get to the next. And that, I think, will require some out-of-application explanation.
Maybe that'll need Ember data.
That's an excellent idea. There's something about north of the border, just... Okay, so next steps, one of them, as I mentioned, levels, progressively get rid of the visualization. Obviously, you can do this for subtraction. I was thinking like Xing out the balls or something, but I'm sure there are all sorts of different things one could try. Tech improvements, I would really like to improve the transitions and master that a little more. CSS also has animations which allow you to do even funkier things. Move to one state and then move to another and then another. So more testing, of course, is always an issue. And as mentioned, I welcome contributions. And this is a little about me, Michael Madrid. That's my GitHub. The project is there. And the technology is mentioned. And I will put this in the meetup discussion forum so you can all see the presentation. Okay, thank you.
So this components is fairly new. How does it relate to web components and technology, WTC, drafts?
Okay, the question is, how do Ember components relate to WC3 web components? And Yehuda and the Ember team are working very hard to make sure they stay in sync. If you look at the documentation, they say that very explicitly. Anyone else from the core team want to add something to that? Okay.
Yeah, line up in spirit. So you can use web components today, basically with Ember components. Thank you, Michael. Good job. Our next speaker is going to share a very condensed version of a talk that he gave at Couchbase conference last week, and it's got some very cool Ember technology in it. So I'm happy to welcome Christy of MHE Labs.
Hi, everybody. So this entire talk is summed up by one tweet on the 19th of August from Tom Dale, who's the Tomster, the hamster. I just learned that MHE Labs, the organization I run, the McGraw-Hill Education R&D Lab, we have an office in New York and Boston, is writing an Ember.js app that connects to Hadoop via WebSockets that visualizes big data using D3. Some guy retweeted this thing with hashtags on every word. But actually, Tom got something wrong. We're not using Hadoop. We're using Couchbase. And this is me last Friday in San Francisco presenting what I'm about to present to you. So for those of you that don't know what Couchbase is a NoSQL database. Hi. And I'm not going to talk anything about it, but the title of my talk in the conference over there is called not NoSQL, which is good, document structure, JSON, all good. We get that, we buy that. That makes a lot of sense. But about no ETL. Not everybody know what ETL is, so let me just define the words. When we mean SQL, we mean some sort of query language, declare it, express your logic, the machine to process, that's all good. The problem, the reason we need ETL is that some of these queries, when it gets complex, gets very hard to process in real time, especially when you log on the dashboard and see a lot of rich data, that's going to pack your database. So what they do, they created something called ETL, which is to extract the results from a previous steps, like a view or something, or query, and write it back to the database. And then you can write it in a SQL table, you can write it in a MongoDB or Couchbase, where when you actually say, hey, I want my summary dashboard, you're actually just retrieving that JSON document that's already been pre-calculated. Now you can certainly imagine building that on top of that data structure and say, well, take the output of this previous step, which is my sum of my visit, and create another composite document that has, let's say, my sum of visit and my customer ID and my kind of like rating or cloud score or whatever type of high-level aggregate. The problem of doing ETL is that some of the times these kind of document in your database that has this high-level aggregate that's written back to this is out of date with reality. You have to refresh the data. You can talk to DBA, and it's like a whole mess. So going back to this, the talk was about no ETL, but it's really a little bit more subversive than that. I'm basically trying to combine the logic that people can express in SQL and the steps that you can express in ETL, which is take the output of that, put it in the input of this, take the output of that, and put it in the input of that, and then eventually you get this really high-level business logic, where you can get fresh data, as in the logic's defined and you're running the query live, so it's always going to be real-time data. But the benefits of ETL is you get fast access of the very high-level information that would fit on your dashboard or whatever. And the question then becomes, when you combine these two concepts together, what do you get? Well, lo and behold, we're in computer science and programming, so we get another three-letter acronym, and it's called FRP. And FRP stands for Functional Reactive Programming. I have no idea what it is. So it's something about behavior, signals, events, and switching, but TLDR. So I have an audience that doesn't know Ember, so I used another example, which is hint, Excel is FRP. What does that mean? Excel is functional, as in every cell is either a value or a function that generates a value. That's kind of definition of functional programming. It's reactive, as in if I change a cell, cells that are dependent on that cell, the sum of the cell or this minus that change as well, right? That's reactive, which means it's reacting to what you're doing. And it's definitely programming. Those people who use Excel spreadsheet and know if there's any book of people who does business development or finance, they know that this actually is something that they do a lot in trying to build this really complicated model in Excel. And they're actually programming with statistical function, all kinds of crazy stuff, lookups and stuff like that, and it's pretty sophisticated. Well, that's what people who are not programmers do, but I'm at an Ember meetup, so clearly we should use an example of Ember. Ember actually is a functional reality programming model. Its first thing is that bindings, when I change this on the homepage, all these screenshots are on the Ember.js.com. As I type CHRIS, it updates. So that's functional and it's reactive, right? Observation chains and dependency graphs is built when you observe a property and you can go all the way up. You can certainly do computer properties, which is a slightly more sophisticated version of this binding, where first name plus last name because full name. That's again an example on the documentation. And finally, you can do computer properties with aggregates, where you have a certain function that loops through that and create that value. So you're basically doing something that someone can say, why do you spend all this time doing it? I can do that in Excel in like 3 minutes. But the idea is that you can go production with this, and you can't go to production with Excel. So, but this is all great, but what if we want to do a lot of data? Can we really use the browser to do all this processing? So we came up with the idea, and when we're thinking about building really cool learning system, one of the things we want to do is to constantly compute and aggregate all the user action and what you're doing, what tests you're taking, what educational content you're accessing, and we can certainly use computer property to figure out what the recommendation for next thing, but I think we'll crash Chrome before that happens. So the goal is to push a lot of these processing using the functional reactive programming model to the server or to the database or to a layer right on top of the database. So we came up with that idea, and that became Ziggrid, which is an open source project. I will share the link at the end. And Ziggrid is basically a JSON-based Excel. So these value, every single value in this JSON document in any type of key value store, you just store it in the database. So that's your Excel value with no formulas. So you store it on the database, hey, you've got a document storage. But what gets interesting is you can create these functions declaratively in Ziggrid. There's a programming language that goes with that. You can certainly map it to other languages, but there's an intermediate AST type of language where you can define this document, which is my monthly summary, is actually a sum of all these other documents, and you aggregate these fields and you put together and you have a new document that's stored in the database. The difference between that and a query is that we don't do it when you ask for it. We do it when this value change, right? So if you commit in your UI that I'm going to change or add a new booking or something like that, and this value is the number of bookings that we have made for this venue, that's automatically done. You don't have to do anything in Ember. Suddenly, if you go and access this document in Ember or other type of tools, you get the latest value. And we'll show you even cooler things after that. And then, because all of this data, regardless of the function that keeps them binded, they're just properties. You can just access them. So this is really cool because if you have Couchbase, which is based on the Memcached protocol, the way you get access to it, you can actually listen to all the changes that's made to this document. So what we did, and we was like, what if we just observe all the changes in these documents in Couchbase using the tap protocol, which is like Y tapping. We can now build a real-time system where we reflect the new values. So that's what we did. We built a system where we are waiting for document to go to the bottom, and then we enhance it through this kind of function and roll up the summary, rank them in the database, which is very hard to do efficiently. If you don't have a B tree, which Couchbase does, we correlate it to do some machine learning stuff, create snapshots, and then create composite like a profile for a student. The problem is I can't really show you the educational use case because that's secret development. I will have to kill you if I show you. So for the purpose of the talk that I gave, we basically use a free, openly available data set for baseball. So each of the at-bats, it's on the bottom. That's a raw level JSON document, and it gets aggregated to outcome and situation, win-loss record, correlation, leaderboard, snapshots of what. And then we build a model and say, can we demo that and share that data set? So what I'm about to do is to give a live demo of what that system looked like. So hopefully this will allow me to mirror. Give me a second here. Can you help me a second? Do I need to like do a mirror function or something? Arrangement or... Okay. So we built this thing called Beane Counter. It's for name for Billy Beane, the person who introduced the user statistics for picking players. So it's a little homage to Oakland A's, but it's also pandering to the San Francisco Bay Area audience. When I click this play button, what I'm doing is that all I'm doing is I'm creating a little process that pumps this JSON document into Couchbase. And then Couchbase is like, oh, cool, I got this document committed. Let me notify Ziggrid with the next layer calculation. So as I get these data in there, as you can see, now I know that I'm April 4th, 2007. We're actually running all the years of data since 2007 in real time. We can do it in 7 minutes. Assuming this thing works, it's always kind of scary when you're giving a live demo. I do have a video in case it doesn't. But I'll leave this up there while I describe what happens. Is that we will then roll up the statistics. This exact thing, same thing happened. Like it didn't work. So I have to show it in like the video. Do you think this will work?
I think the hotness became 0, if that means anything. Give it time.
So last time when I was at a conference, I actually waited it to happen and I gave up. And then I gave my video from my presentation from a video. And then by the time I switched back to my presentation in this app, it actually loaded all the data. It's like, damn it. Now I'm like, can I actually make the same mistake or again?
Yeah, WebSockets without SSL are notoriously bad.
I know. For Wi-Fi's and stuff like that. Okay, I'm going to do it for the video. Sorry. Hopefully this will work later. So, not live demo. So, when you press the... It's almost the same. I could have lied to you. But I didn't because I love you guys. So as as this data actually come in, we can now show both data that is very low level, such as how many at-bats you are. That's a pure count of how many events that comes in. But we're also immediately calculating based on the model you just said before, like Excel. Like it doesn't really matter if the field is an actual field or a calculated value, where these are clutchness, hotness, and the leaderboard, which we average all their events, and then we sort them using a B-tree structure within Couchbase. And all of these things is happening with a simple WebSocket that observe these documents being changed. No logic in JavaScript. Purely observing this document. And we have a separate engine that's reading and writing into the database to maintain the consistency, right? And we were able to do this fairly efficiently, so we know now, like we're about 3 months through the season. This is all cool, but let me show you something even better. So what we did was to say, what if we can, as this keeps going, you can switch to Alex Rodriguez or whatever. So what we did was that we plotted some high-level machine learning statistics called hotness and goodness. Hotness is a decay function. The more, like if you like get 7 home runs in a row, then you go up. Goodness is, did you really help your team when they really needed you? Like Alex Rodriguez didn't for a long time. And we were hoping to be able to distinguish that by looking at the trend data. So we're actually keeping history and doing a bunch of stuff and keeping the last 20 records and doing some sums around that. So now what you're seeing here is the plot of each player as they go through May 2010, right, with their hotness and goodness factor. This is notoriously hard to do in the database, the decay function, where you update the value after a minute and you bring it down. After 2 more minutes, you bring it back down. But that's really easy to do when you're doing it in the background. And you can also trace how that works, and you see a player coming up and down. we realized that we flip hotness and goodness. So you see that up and down. You're not supposed to become a great player one day and the other one, but that's actually the hotness dimension. This is the goodness direction. We should fix that. Someone asked me, should I go and bet, in Vegas for this? But it's actually pretty cool because as the hit data come in, I know immediately the trending data immediately. I don't have to refresh the page. Everything is coming in. All I'm in is reading and subscribing to the changes in my key value store. So this is really cool, but it's actually pretty simple, right? So you have the JSON store, the Couchbase off the shelf, no change, install it, and you got it. And you've got this essentially model description, calculation, event train. These are the functions in Excel that we are representing in JSON. We have a Java system that kind of deals with the Couchbase and then pumps through a WebSocket all the model data in Ember. So I'm going to invite two people who work with me on actually making this sexy UI happen, and that's Stefan and Alex, and they wrote the code, of which they'll walk you through the front-end part of this. Yeah.
Hey guys. Hello. Alex is sick. Anyways, so Alex and me both work at Yap. We do cool stuff, and we have the excellent opportunity to help Chris with many of his fun, crazy projects. Often quite crazy, but they're lots of fun. They're good. So Ember has strong conventions. It has encapsulation, but what does this mean? It means productivity. Yeah. Oops. So, yeah, okay. Happens, even bad. I wish that Keynote had strong conventions and I'd be more. Anyways, so you have these strong conventions, you have this productivity, but where it really matters is when the requirements change or are entirely unknown. So specifically with this project, Chris was like, I have this great idea, I have a demo, like 2 seconds from now. Nothing exists. There's no backend, no front end. The ideas all exist. Components of the backend exist. Let's make it work. So a wild demo appears, and in Chris style, they're crazy, but they're totally attainable. Anyway, so it was a big fun spike. And Alex, if you want to jump in at any point, let me know. Or just steal the mic. So basically, D3, Ember, and Ziggrid. What a Ziggrid is. When we started this, it was kind of unknown. So remember we had these strong conventions in Ember? We did know what the UI was going to look like. We had approximations of what this data was going to look like. We had some sample streams of data coming in that kind of changed over time, but it didn't really matter because these strong conventions and encapsulation allowed us to be productive without knowing an entire huge aspect of the system. And when these things did become known, the changes weren't too terribly dramatic, but we were still able to be productive while the backend was being built and changing, and as the models changed, and as we realized, oh, this isn't possible, let's switch it like this. Our UI was basically built of a whole bunch of components, and usually when changes came in or we realized new features from the backend, they were minor changes actually to make the front end work. As you can see, we had a fun D3 visualization, which the D3 expert over there in the corner came and helped us out with, which was awesome. But again, I'll break it down into a bunch of components that we know we're going to need, how they are wired together. As we realized, we just kind of wired them together and adjusted as we needed to. So, I don't want to play this video too. So, again, we need a D3 visualization. Let's make it work before we have the data. Stick in a component, feed it data, be done with it, right? But as it turned out, there was a hell of a lot of data that was actually coming through. Once we actually started getting real amounts, so when we first started, we would get trickles of data, and as they improved the performance of the backend, we started getting a lot of data, to the point where we were actually load balancing incoming data across multiple servers in WebSockets. And it turns out WebSocket tooling in the browser is actually really bad. If you open up the network tab, go to WebSockets, they're not live. Makes no sense, right? WebSockets are meant for live, but the network tab for WebSockets is not live. Additionally, so we decided, hey, let's just console log everything so we could see. We were getting so much data of just console logging, we would crash our browsers and crash our machines. So never mind that this is a lot of data coming through. Our visualization wouldn't be able to keep up. Ember probably wouldn't, but even just printing consoles the DOM was in no way. So what we basically did is we throttled in two places once we realized this. But remember, everything was really built into components. So when these changes happened, they were, I don't know, like 5 minutes each. Basically, it's like, let's make this change. 5 minutes on both sides, done. So the first thing was we're going to throttle incoming WebSocket requests. So we were receiving all of these messages, we'd push them onto a queue, and then every 100 milliseconds or whatever we ended up choosing, we would just flush that queue. This helped out dramatically. Our browser stopped crashing, we could actually work on stuff, it was good. And on the other side, it turns out feeding this much data into a visualization is entirely useless. Everything just jitters around instantaneously, even if you add easing it. So, again, we throttled the input to D3 to every 100 milliseconds. And remember, because we're not storing any data client-side, we're merely reading a stream from the backend. The backend has all of this logic. This actually made the visualization nice, slowed stuff down. It was actually pretty good. Those were the big takeaways from these various things. And because we're running out of time, I'm not going to go into too much detail, but if someone has some questions, feel free to ping either of us, or bug a meet for some D3 tips. I'm going to pass this back off to Chris. Or Chris.
I have a question.
Sure.
Is this open source? Will it be open source?
I believe it is open source.
I'll show you the link. Can you?
So I'm trying to actually attempt failing again.
So yes, it will be open source. It's my next side. So it's github.com/syndicate hyphen, I hate hyphens, /Ziggrid. I don't think it's case sensitive, it's GitHub, right? So take a picture of that if you want to download the code. The reason we open source this is because we really want people in data science and big data to help us create some formulas. Because if we can replicate all the formulas in Excel, that's pretty cool. Now you can't do it in Excel, but the entire Ziggrid definition language is a JSON document you can store in Couchbase, so you can write an Ember component to actually edit it, right? So you can actually define your model in an Ember-like UI and then have that be processing underneath it. So this is an open source project that hopefully will become the replacement for Hadoop, because when you read if your data is not big, don't use Hadoop, it's buggy and awful and you hate yourself. It's actually quite true, right? Which is that Hadoop is a very blunt tool, it's an elephant. It goes really slowly, but because something about momentum and times mass, right? There's no choice but for you to move slowly and move all that stuff. So Ziggrid was modeled after the animal zebra, right? Which is that if you have a gunshot in a watering hole, they all shock and start running, right? That's what we want. We want a herd of reacting zebras. Hopefully that will work. This is actually the live demo that I couldn't show you before, but I was able to get a better network connection. So you can see different players. And the sum rate now is 2008, so let's go to 2008. We snapshot the previous year data, so let's say you're past a year, you can still get the data, which is a really nice effect.
It's not the UI that snapshots, it's all...
Yes, the backend actually say, hey, I'm not overwriting this document, I'm creating a new document for May 25th, and there's another document for May 24th. You can actually start thinning out those things so that you can have a dragging things where you can access old level of document. You just can, as you go to history, it becomes every month, but you can do that without changing anything in the app. It's just a matter of the communication between your WebSocket protocol and the backend. And this visualization backend, as you can see different all-star classes and see how people move around. This is just so freaking sexy. Freddie Chan Sanchez is not super sexy, but you can see that he is now not actually doing very good. Hopefully, if he gets a hidden trick, we'll go back up there. It is we didn't get to this, but you can drag back and forth and go back to a point in time, but that feature was, I think, 4 hours away from being done. But, this is a new season, so things moves around. You can run this on your local machine if you install Couchbase and play with it. I think this is the reason I gave the talk was to get people to think beyond batch processing in big data and start uniting the world of HTML5 and big data into one that is functional, reactive, real-time, all the way down. And that's what McGraw-Hill Education is doing. We believe that textbooks are boring and they're necessary in some cases, but what if we take all the assets we have in there, chop into small pieces into components and stuff like that, and then tie back together with an algorithm that's run in real time? That would be pretty cool. So, thank you very much.
In the interest of time, we're going to keep going. Find Chris after if you've got questions about that. Chris Selden, come on up.
Also, all of the data was going through Ember data.
All right, Ember data was behind the scenes in there.
That's the new beta?
Yeah.
1.0 beta something.
It was master whenever we did this.
Yep. So speaking of betas and master, et cetera, our next speaker is going to talk a little bit about the roadmap for Ember. And this is a gentleman who I have the pleasure of working with closely, both at YAP today and also at Oxygen Media a few years back. So as soon as he gets set up. Just hit play. I think you're going to do it. There you go. Ladies and gentlemen, Chris Selden.
As Luke said, I work at YAP, member of the core team. I'm going to talk about what's coming up. So on our roadmap, we want to improve our testing story. Also, we're trying to move towards modules. Our plan is to make everything ES6 modules and transpile them to AMD. We'd like to improve the tooling to make it easier to get started. We'd like to improve the animation story when I get to a release of Ember data. And then the last thing, I'm going to go into more detail because it's kind of cryptic, but it's an improvement to the templating. We've moved to a release cycle where we're going to slowly move features, graduate features into a beta, and then wherever the beta is at the end of 6 weeks, we're going to release that as the next point release. There's a more detailed post on the Ember blog going into more detail here. The first release that we're going to the current feature that's in the beta right now is query param support and Ember routes.
Yes.
Pagination, whatever. So now to go into the roadmap, it's mentioned in the past 3 talks, is the Ember App Kit. And this is our test bed for tooling. So we're improving the getting started. We would like to have command line tools that help you generate a new project, add things to it, test. And so this is, you can get, there was a link. You can probably Google it. It's under Stefan Penner's handle. It's actually came from one of our MHE projects, extracted from there. It uses Karma for testing, and the moving away. So one of the things is before, early on, Ember was more browser style, where you had a global namespace and everything is under that. We've been moving internally, trying to move away from that, which greatly aids in testing, and some of the examples in the Ember app kit demonstrate this. Basically, inside Ember, since everything uses conventions and looks stuff up by name, Ember has a component called the resolver that looks up stuff by convention. Ember App Kit comes with its own resolver. It's going to be the next generation that uses modules. So you want to try this out if you want to kind of help shape where the tooling is going and how you're going to be doing projects in the future. I mean, we still plan to support till 2.0 the existing resolver, but all the documentation and everything is going to move towards this. Ember Data, its beta has been released. There's been quite dramatic changes from the previous version. There's a lot of momentum on it. Yehuda and Tom have been closing tickets at a very rapid rate. When it is finally released and out of beta, its versions will be in a lockstep with Ember versions. So even though it's 1.0 beta, by the time it's released, it will match wherever Ember. What?
I like how you sidestepped.
Which version did you say?
9.7.
Anyway, so animations, the guy who did Ember Animated Outlet is going to be working on this. Some just kind of brief things of note that are just, he specifically is trying to work on transitions, so you'd be able to, in a link to, specify a transition. Under the hood, we would like to build primitives to support this. Like one of the main things is to, when a view is outgoing, to disconnect it so it stays despite changing what it was bound to, so you can safely animate it out without worrying the underlying data. So now on to my favorite topic, and the one that I know more about because this is something that I'm going to be working on with Yehuda. So one of the nice things about Ember's templating is it's extremely flexible. You can put something dynamic in without changing your HTML structure. You don't need to add a span to bind a field, whereas in most templating languages you do. But one of the drawbacks from that is it has to insert something that it can search for and find, because that doesn't affect the actual structure. This is where the script tags come from that you see when you inspect your HTML. This is because the template, you give it a context and it gives you back a string. And the string then you place into DOM, and then you have to go find everything that you're going to bind to and update. In HTML bars, it is going to compile down to something that generates DOM rather than a string, and the helpers are going to have context within that DOM. So they're going to be able to know whether or not they're in an attribute. What this does is, right now you have to do the bind attr href URL because the helper doesn't have context, it just knows that it's outputting a string, so you have to clue it in that it's an attribute, and it needs to escape the URL as though it's an attribute, and that's what it's outputting, and it needs to add something into the anchor tag to be able to then find that anchor tag and update that attribute. And the HTML bars, it will be tokenized. URL will know that it's in an attribute, and we'll have a reference to the node that it output, and can update it without sticking any data, special data attribute or anything that it has to search for to find. Another nice thing is within an attribute you can have bindings. So this mail to email will understand that it's a part of an attribute that has a static component, and you can bind to it. This is also kind of in line with moving towards web components and understand, because the squiggly brackets are how web components say what's bound, and this part of the earlier question of regarding web components. And this actually, when you open a complex Ember view, not only is this messy to look at, but it actually adds a lot of weight to just the byte size is pretty sizable. So these will all go away because it will have the placeholder as when it compiled, and doesn't need to search and find it in order to update it. So that's my favorite feature upcoming. So this is the...
Are there any benefits for like cross-site scripting?
Yes, because he asked if there's benefits for cross-site scripting. I think he was trying to hint. Since it has a node and it's going to be updating the text content, the browser will escape anything because it won't be compiling your string. And so there will be no more regex that tries to sanitize the string you're updating. The browser will be responsible for it. It will be setting, in the case of the attribute earlier, you're just going to be calling the DOM to set the attribute, and the browser will take care of not letting it escape that. So, which is also a performance thing and a garbage collection issue. So this is in addition to developer ergonomics, this should have performance improvements, all while maintaining the not having to add a span or div to make something dynamic. You can just place directly in.
Do you know if we'll have to rewrite our templates, or like is it backwards compatible or not?
We will be doing it in a backwards compatible way. And
What about helpers?
so helpers will still be able to return a string, and we will fit that in, but the new helpers will have, in the options that pass along to a helper, will have like an element that they can interface and do DOM stuff directly. I mean, since we're 1.0 and we'd like to make this a 1x feature. We're not planning to break backwards compatibility, but you're likely, well, the backwards compatibility will likely come with a performance cost, and you want to update things, but all the built-in helpers will be updated. So it'll be mainly, you're focused on custom views and custom helpers. It's where you would need to update, but your basic templates and built-in helpers will be updated with the version update. With that, is there any questions?
How soon are you expecting this?
Not a good question. How soon can we expect this? I really, I don't know. That's a fair question.
Sorry.
If anybody's interested in sponsoring Yap Labs development work on it, it could go faster.
Good segue. Yeah, I mean, we're eager to get it, so as soon as we can. Right now, where it's at is we have the compiler for HTML bars. It's at tilde HTML bars. It is waiting on some work in handlebars to move away from globals towards AMD modules. It's a work in progress. Once that's done, we will start spiking on getting it working with Ember, and as you know, everybody on the Ember core, we all use Ember in our work, but it's also working on Ember is something we fit into. So that's, unless somebody wants to I guess, to work on it full time, we try and fit it in. So.
Cool. All right. Any other questions for Chris? Great. Thanks. All right. So that concludes the formal part of the evening. Thank you all for being here. I know it was a longer one. Hope your brain didn't melt too much. I believe that we are welcome to hang out in this space up until about 10. Is that right, Paula? Cool. Also, there's some pitchers of beer that have been getting filled up, and there's still food. So get to know other folks that are here. Make yourself comfortable, and we'll see you either at the Hacker Hours on October 1st or next month on October 24th. Thanks, everybody.